Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the Volunteer Florida Service Enterprise Informational Session. This will be recorded and posted to the Volunteer Florida website by the end of this week. All participants are in listen-only mode, but please feel free to ask questions in the chat box. We will allow time for Q&A at the end of this session. I'm Audrey Kidwell. I'm the Program and Projects Manager at Volunteer Florida, and I'm excited to be joined by Volunteer Florida's CEO, Corey Simon. We want to ensure that you're all familiar with Volunteer Florida, so I'm going to turn it over to Corey Simon to start us off.
Thank you, Audrey. Good afternoon and Happy New Year, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm Corey Simon, CEO of Volunteer Florida, and I'm so pleased to welcome you all to this session to learn more about the Service Enterprise Certification Program with Points of Light and how best to leverage its resources to empower Florida's nonprofit organizations. Achieving a Service Enterprise certification is a prestigious accomplishment. In fact, those organizations that certify join the top 11% of nonprofits nationwide in volunteer management and organizational performance. Research shows that for every $1 invested in effective volunteer management, organizations can expect a $3 to $6 return through more effective program delivery. That's a 300 to 600% return on investment to better achieve your organization's mission. Volunteer Florida is proud to stand with the Sunshine State's Service Enterprise Hub, offering this curriculum to Florida's incredible array of nonprofit organizations, subsequently helping our communities march forward stronger together. We're excited to take this next step with you, and I encourage you to absorb today's information and leverage this opportunity for your organization. Again, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Corey. We're excited to have you on this call, and we're all excited for you to be here listening to learn more about Service Enterprise and how your organization could be involved. I wanted to talk briefly about Points of Light to make sure you guys are all aware that this is a program that we're working in conjunction with Points of Light. They're the world's largest organization dedicated to volunteer service. Their mission is to inspire, equip, and mobilize people to take action that change the world. You may be familiar with their annual Service Unites conference or nominated a volunteer for their daily Point of Light. We're excited to be working with them, and they are the official owner and certifier of Service Enterprise Initiative. We're going to talk briefly about what is Service Enterprise. That word does get used a lot, and so we want to talk about it up front. It's an organization that doesn't just engage volunteers. It operates with a culture of volunteerism that enables it to fundamentally leverage volunteers and their skills to achieve its social mission. These high-performing organizations have deeply integrated volunteers into their strategic plan and day-to-day operations, thereby reducing the cost and increasing efficiency and effectiveness in providing services to fulfill your mission. The goal of the Service Enterprise Program is to strengthen the capacity of the organization to strategically and effectively engage volunteers to address organizational and community needs. I'll get to the nuts and bolts of the Service Enterprise Program in a moment, but I think the biggest takeaway here is that the Service Enterprise is not a volunteer management training program. It's a change management program focused on the value and benefit of engaging volunteers in meaningful and mission-driven ways. Learning and employing best practices in volunteer engagement are certainly part of the roadmap to becoming a certified service enterprise, but the program itself is about supporting organizations to change the way that you think about volunteers and the potential that volunteers hold for improving your organization's operations. Let's get started with a brief video about Service Enterprise.
So you're sitting at your desk and you're reviewing your list of tasks for the day. With each hour that passes, you mark one task off and yet two more appear. You talk with your team, you talk with your boss, and everyone is having the same problem. As you look at your to-do list, you worry that you're not spending your time efficiently. Some of your responsibilities are foreign to you, and you feel like you're building a bicycle and riding it at the same time. Next month, you have to complete your department's annual budget. You carve out an hour every day to focus on it, but you're distracted by other projects, and math is not your strong suit. You think of your neighbor Sandra, an accountant, and wish she would suddenly appear to take on the responsibility. Now, consider she could appear. Imagine that Sandra, or someone like Sandra, had a role built into your organization to use her specific skill set to serve your organization. With her help, you would focus on what you're good at. You would feel like the work your team is doing is making a tangible contribution to your organization's mission, the same mission that attracted you to join the organization. By engaging Sandra and other skill-based volunteers, your organization could operate as a service enterprise. A service enterprise is an organization that fundamentally leverages volunteers and their skills to achieve its social mission. This means engaging volunteers in every area of your work, from direct service to operations to administration. Research conducted by TCC Group and Deloitte demonstrates that nonprofits operating as service enterprises outperform peer organizations on all measures of organizational capacity, thereby allowing these organizations to more effectively address community needs and operate at almost half the median budget. When an organization leverages volunteers and achieves an effective volunteer management model, not only do they lead and manage their organizations better, but they are also significantly more adaptable, sustainable, and better resourced to do their work, and therefore able to sustainably go to scale. Research conducted by Deloitte identified the following 10 characteristics as consistent and critical practices for nonprofit service enterprises. Planning and development. Developing a strategy and infrastructure for mission-driven volunteer engagement. Leadership support. Demonstrated executive commitment to volunteer engagement. Resource allocation. Allocation of resources, time, money, human capital, and tools to volunteer engagement. Tracking and evaluation. Determining service value, tracking volunteer retention, assessing the quality of volunteer experiences, and monitoring the outputs and outcomes of volunteers in meeting the mission of the organization through a volunteer tracking system. Outreach. Ongoing outreach and volunteer recruitment to sustain ongoing volunteer engagement. Funding. Fund development for volunteer engagement. Effective training. Train volunteers and the employees that manage them to effectively fill their positions. Onboarding and supervision. Matching volunteers to appropriate positions, clarifying their roles, orienting and supporting them throughout their time with the organization. Technology and communication. Using best practices in technology and communication to enhance volunteer engagement. Partnering to extend reach. Creating a participatory and mutually beneficial relationship with the community to increase community engagement and reach. The Service Enterprise Initiative is a California volunteer social innovation inspired by reimagining service and led by Points of Light. The Service Enterprise Initiative strengthens the capacity of organizations through a comprehensive research-based assessment, training, coaching, and certification model. Organizations introducing the initiative to agencies in their community are witnessing fundamental changes to how they are strategically engaging volunteers. This initiative is a collaborative effort made possible with the innovative leadership of California volunteers, California Volunteer Centers, the Corporation for National and Community Service, Points of Light, and the dedication of TCC Group, Algorithm, Deloitte, and RGK Center for Philanthropy and Community Service. To learn more about this initiative, go to www.pointsoflight.org/service-enterprise-initiative.
All right, so hopefully that video really helped to illustrate what service enterprise is. So now we're going to talk about the research. Service enterprise initially came from Reimagining Service, a national multi-sector coalition dedicated to increasing social impact through the adoption of effective volunteer engagement practices. The coalition first formed in response to the signing of the Kennedy Serve America Act in 2009. and since that time has worked collaboratively to support the development of models, resources, and research that helps make the case for volunteer engagement. And from this research, there are 4 guiding principles that were formed. The first guiding principle is that the volunteer ecosystem is most effective when all sectors participate in its evolution. Volunteerism doesn't exist in a single sector, and the responsibility for successful volunteer engagement resides beyond nonprofits alone. Faith-based organizations, school districts, corporations, philanthropy, government, and nonprofits all have important roles to play in achieving better outcomes for our communities. Not one portion of the field can lead this evolution on its own. The second guiding principle is to make volunteer engagement a core function of organizations, not just an add-on. Engaging volunteers effectively can help an organization serve more people in the community, as well as change the core economics of an organization, which can allow it to scale more quickly and cost-effective. The third principle is to focus volunteer engagement on true community needs. Rather than just responding to the supply of volunteers, identifying key priorities in the community, then purposely seeking out volunteers with the skills needed to address those priorities. And then finally, in order to get a return, you really have to invest. Organizations that make volunteers the central part of their work and manage them see a 3 to 6 times more on their return of investment. This is a smart way to maximize impact, but it does require upfront and ongoing financial investment in volunteer engagement. And we need funders who believe that funding volunteer engagement helps organizations achieve their broader mission. So using the research, the TCC group looked deeper at the top performers in volunteer management and 4 other core capacities: leadership, adaptability, management, and technical capabilities, as well as the organizational culture. They found that only about 11% of organizations were considered positive deviants. And so through Points of Light, the name from positive deviance was changed to service enterprise. And the research discovered 5 critical pieces of information about the positive deviance or these service enterprise agencies. So the first one is, if you manage volunteers well, you're likely doing lots of other things well in your organization as well. The second key finding is that organizations can use any number of volunteers and manage them well, exhibit much stronger leadership and management behaviors. In addition to being better led and managed, service enterprises are significantly more adaptable, sustainable, and capable of going to scale, which is what most organizations are aiming to do. The fourth key finding is that service enterprises have strong and well-developed human resource practices. Most service enterprise agencies view volunteers as unpaid human capital or volunteer employees. This means they invest the time to define the work that is needed to be done by volunteers. They recruit for that specific position, they provide training, adequate supervision and resources, and then recognize the results that they produce. And they promote volunteers to leadership as well. And then the last key finding is an interesting one as it gets to the economic value of volunteers. The research showed that organizations that engage volunteers are equally as effective as peers without volunteers, but is almost half the median budget. So building off this research, Reimagining Service, and then Points of Light looked at these high-performing organizations to really understand the how and why they achieved the results. And then they identified the 10 characteristics that was consistent and critical practices for nonprofit service enterprise. In the video we just watched, it does give you a breakdown of kind of what is in each one of these characteristics. But while we understand all 10 are really important, these 3 are the ones that are the key to success of becoming a service enterprise organization: planning and development, leadership support, and providing effective trainings. So let's talk briefly about some of the benefits for your organization to become a service enterprise. The process to become a service enterprise will give you the ability to look at internal staff capacity in a new way and leverage skills volunteers to expand the capacity to achieve your mission. The data showed that 80% of certified service enterprises report an increase in both general volunteers and skills-based volunteers, which leads to an increased capacity. And then the program helps organizations to also identify and address their true needs, and then to integrate volunteers into those needs at the agency. Service enterprises also have a record of impact. The initial Reimagining Service Council did research that shows for every $1 invested in volunteer engagement, an organization would receive $3 to $6 return on that investment. We can see the impact in the return with service enterprise today through the certification process. We have great impact data that communicates the impact or the value of service enterprises. Every organization that certifies is required to calculate their own return on investment. All right, let's take a look at the model and the process. It creates a culture of volunteerism through change management, builds capacity by engaging volunteers throughout the organization, engages senior leadership from the beginning of the process, measures organizational readiness accurately using a statistically valid research-based assessment tool, receive training and coaching towards certification, and gain experience through cross-sector learning with peer group cohorts. In this 7-step process, organizations start by completing an application and readiness assessment and then attending orientation. The SED, which is the Service Enterprise Diagnostic or SED tool, is an online assessment that evaluates your organization's volunteer engagement practices. The SED is a key tool to help you get a baseline understanding of where your organization's volunteer engagement practices are and how you can improve to become a service enterprise. The SED debrief, following the completion of the SED, Volunteer Florida will meet with each organization to review your individual's team SED results. For a robust discussion of the current state at your organization and where they'd like to go during the service enterprise process. The next in the process is the training, which is about 15 hours, and it'll be delivered over a course of 7 weeks. In these sessions, you'll look at things such as building board support for your organization, determining your return on volunteer investment, defining volunteer roles, and identifying ways to evaluate your process. And then coaching. After training, organizations will work with an experienced coach to build an organizational action plan to incorporate the service enterprise characteristic standards into your organizational culture, system, and processes. The number and hours of coaching will vary dependent upon the organization. And then the last is certification. Once an organization has made significant progress towards becoming a service enterprise, you can decide to apply for certification. Working with the coach, Volunteer Florida, and your agency, you'll provide evidence of ways in which you have implemented some of these service enterprises best practices. The time that it takes to get the certification of your organization does vary. It can take as little as 3 months, but for most organizations, it takes around 8 to 12 months. And again, I just really want to highlight some important things when it comes to being service enterprise. So it really does assess the strengths of your volunteer engagement work. It takes stocks of emerging challenges in your community. It prioritizes what's important at your agency, and you gain new tools for working together. All right, so we're going to talk into what it looks like now at Volunteer Florida. So the value of participation is approximately $7,000 to $10,000 dollars per organization. Volunteer Florida is really excited to bring this training to Florida for our nonprofit community. So we're going to be absorbing most of the cost for our organizations. And that includes the 16 to 20 hours of training, that professional coaching you're going to receive, and then the certification process with Points of Light. We ask organizations to cover the Service Enterprise Diagnostic Evaluation, which is $380. We want to ensure that organizations have some buy-in to this Service Enterprise training. I will note that there is no cost to apply to be a part of Service Enterprise in Florida. Organizations that meet the criteria and are selected to go through the training would be asked to cover the cost of the Service Enterprise Diagnostic Evaluation. So how to apply? Volunteer Florida has to create a portal, an application on your behalf. And so what we ask is for you to submit an intent to apply by January 11th. You'll provide it to myself, Audrey Kidwell, at audrey@volunteerflorida.org. We ask that you include the organization's name. Please do not use any abbreviations or nicknames. The contact name and email of the person who will be completing the application. After this call, we'll have the application instructions and the list of questions that will be asked of you posted to the Volunteer Florida website. And then applications are due by 5 p.m. on February 18th. I have a little bit of a visual timeline for you all to get some key dates. Again, applications are due February 18th. We tentatively have orientation scheduled for March 10th. With training kicking off in April. The training, like I said, is a few hours a week for several weeks. And so it'll go from April to June. Once training is over, organizations will work with a coach to complete your organizational action plan and prepare for certification. The number of hours and what coaching looks like I said, will vary depending on the goals that you guys have set forward for each individual agency. And then organizations have 12 months from the last training to complete certification. And don't worry, your organization should not have any trouble completing certification, and Volunteer Florida and your coach will work to make sure that you guys stay on track. And then before I answer some questions, I just wanted to mention why I personally love this training. You know, it's not really about the best practices, which some of those will be shared, but it is really about change management that's grounded in research, which I think is really important for our field. And I also love that this training is not just for volunteer managers. It does require senior leadership to participate in the process of helping the agency integrate volunteers into your agency. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to sit for just a few minutes to see if there are any questions. There was a question about how the size of the nonprofit that can apply. At the time, there isn't a minimum number of individuals. We will say if you have a smaller number of staff, we would expect to see probably some board support sitting in for some of those key leadership roles. And there's not also like a minimum or maximum based on like budget size as well. So just keeping that in mind. So there's not like if your agency looks like this, you would be perfect. It is really a range of sizes on staff and budget size as well. This presentation is recorded and will be available on the Volunteer Florida website by the end of this week, along with the application instructions and application questions as well. There's a couple of questions about leadership. And so in the application, there's questions on how your leadership plans to engage in the Service Enterprise Initiative. And through the training, leadership is required to be on all of those sessions as well. And if you apply and are chosen, then we give information on what those look like for each session, because some sessions require like the COO or the department, the HR department, things like that. So once selected, there's good materials provided on who needs to provide what. And so, but ideally the leadership will attend all of the coaching calls, will be helpful in implementing some of the service enterprise initiative into the agency. Okay, I think I've answered most of the questions. Again, a copy of this recording and PowerPoint will be on the Volunteer Florida website by the end of this week, along with the application instructions and application questions. But anytime you have any questions, I'm happy to answer things that are very specific to your agency. Please email me at audrey@volunteerflorida.org, or my phone number is on the screen, extension 118. I'm happy to chat as much as needed for interested organizations. So again, thank you so much for your time today. And if you have any questions, I look forward to connecting with you.